The air in the restaurant was thick with the scent of expensive wine and unspoken judgment. Every glance from across the room felt like a pinprick, but I had learned to ignore them, focusing only on the man across the table. His name is Ethan. He's 63, a successful real estate mogul, and the reason my life is currently a highly scrutinized scandal in our wealthy little corner of Greenwich. I'm Jenna, and I'm 26 years old, and I'm currently dating a 63-year-old real estate mogul who happens to be a widower. The story is kind of complicated and a little ironic. I used to be his late wife's personal assistant when she was alive. Eleanor was a kind woman, but she sadly passed away from a rare heart condition. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. What most people don't know is that while she was still alive, he and I were secretly seeing each other. It went on for about a year before she passed. I know it sounds wrong, a terrible betrayal, but feelings just happened. He saw me, truly saw me in a way Eleanor, for all her goodness, never could. I was his escape, and he was my grounding. It's been a year since her death, and now he wants to make things official between us. He's been serious about it, talking about marriage, commitment, and all that. He even gave me his mother's heirloom necklace last night, but ever since we made our relationship public, his family has been completely against it. He has 2 sons and 1 daughter, and his daughter, Charlotte, who's 30, older than me, absolutely despises me. She hates me to the core and hasn't tried to hide it for a second, accusing me of being a gold digger who swooped in the moment her mother was gone. The tension is suffocating, and I worry it might tear us apart. The tension with Ethan's daughter Charlotte reached a boiling point last week at a charity gala in Newport. She cornered me near the silent auction, her eyes like chips of glacial ice. "You think you're clever, Jenna," she hissed, low enough that only I could hear. "Wearing Eleanor's colors, even dating her husband. But you won't take her place. Not in this family. Not ever." Her raw hatred fueled my own sudden, surprising flash of anger. I almost retorted, but Ethan appeared, his smile masking the undercurrent of unease. He guided me away, but her words, so sharp and deliberate, had already burrowed under my skin. I keep telling myself this isn't about the money, the beautiful penthouse overlooking Central Park, or the private jet we use for weekend trips. This is about the deep, confusing love I feel for Ethan. He makes me feel safe, cherished, despite the cavernous age gap. Yet Charlotte's cruel certainty plants seeds of doubt. Was it all a manipulation? Did I truly betray Eleanor's trust just for a life of luxury? Sometimes, late at night, staring at the ceiling of the mansion that was once Eleanor's, I hear the whispers of my own conscience. The memory of Eleanor, kind and unsuspecting, helping me pick out a new dress for a date with a friend, twists a knot in my stomach. She was vulnerable, and I used her access to get closer to him. The weight of that guilt is becoming unbearable, and I fear the full price of this secret is yet to be paid. I have a terrible feeling that Charlotte is digging, seeking the truth of our hidden relationship. And if she finds it, everything will shatter. 2 days ago, a plain manila envelope arrived at the brownstone. There was no sender address, and the postmark was from an obscure town in rural Massachusetts, a place I've never heard of. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside, nestled among a few grains of sand, was a single, faded photograph. It was a picture of Eleanor, smiling brightly, standing next to an old, weathered wooden sign reading, "The Old Shore Inn." Beneath the picture, scrawled in thin, shakily handwriting, was a single, unnerving sentence. "She knew more than you think." A wave of cold dread washed over me, instantly eclipsing my usual anxiety about Charlotte. Eleanor was always so fragile, so focused on her health. It was impossible that she was traveling to remote coastal inns. The photo felt like a direct threat, a piece of evidence meant to sow chaos. Who sent this? It couldn't be Charlotte. Her style of attack is loud, public, and direct. It felt calculated and deeply suspenseful. I quickly burned the photo and the envelope in the fireplace, watching the evidence curl and turn to ash, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure fear. I had always comforted myself with the belief that our affair was the perfect secret, safely buried with Eleanor. But now, this package suggests a third party, someone who might possess the true account of that year, the year of my betrayal. Could someone else have been observing us? Was Eleanor truly as oblivious as I believed? I need to find the Old Shore Inn and understand the connection before this mysterious person exposes everything. My life with Ethan, built on a foundation of lies, suddenly feels structurally unsound, ready to collapse into an ocean of public shame and private ruin. I couldn't share the terror of the package with Ethan. He's already under immense pressure from his business and the constant drama with his children. Telling him would risk exposing the whole affair to him, a truth we've both implicitly agreed to keep buried. This investigation had to be mine alone. I secretly took a car, not one of Ethan's flashier models, but a rental with dark tint, and began the long, nervous drive north toward the Massachusetts coast. The anonymity was a relief. I was just Jenna, a woman on a quiet, desperate mission, not the notorious young fiancé. As I drove, I replayed the whole scenario in my head. Eleanor's final year. She had been weak, often confined to the master suite. But there was one month, about 6 weeks before her passing, when she insisted on visiting an old friend upstate. She was gone for 10 days. I remember Ethan seeming oddly relaxed during that time, taking me to museums and concerts we couldn't attend when she was home. Could this Shore Inn be where she really was? Was this friend perhaps a contact, now a loose end, or worse, a vengeful witness? I pulled into a small, gas station diner near the coast. The town named Seaview was exactly the kind of place you'd go to disappear. I ordered a coffee, my hands shaking. I needed to find a local who might know about the inn. The journey itself was an adrenaline-fueled mix of curiosity and pure survival instinct. I was risking everything, but the terrifying prospect of that photograph falling into Charlotte's hands was a far greater fear than the loneliness of this mission. The truth, I realized, was no longer a matter of morality. It was a matter of survival. I finally found the Old Shore Inn after 2 hours of navigating winding coastal roads. It wasn't a charming vacation spot. It was a dreary, gray building that looked beaten down by decades of salt and wind. The sign in the photograph was still there, now even more faded. The sight of it made the air catch in my throat. I felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding, as if I were crossing a threshold into a past I wasn't meant to disturb. I walked into the lobby, which smelled faintly of mildew and old coffee. Behind a small cluttered desk sat a woman who looked to be in her late 60s, her eyes sharp and assessing. She wore a name tag that read Doris. I tried to play it cool, a wealthy tourist looking for local history. "I'm looking for information about a former guest," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "She would have stayed here, maybe a year and a half ago. A woman named Eleanor Sterling." Doris paused, her expression unreadable. She slowly pushed a guest book toward me. "We respect our guests' privacy, dear," she said, her voice gravelly. "But the book speaks for itself." I scanned the delicate looping cursive of the sign-in pages until I found it. Eleanor Sterling, New York, New York. She had been here. But next to her name, written in the same hand, was another name that made the blood drain from my face. Charlotte Sterling. Ethan's daughter wasn't digging for the truth. She was part of it. The truth wasn't a secret she was trying to uncover. It was a plan they had hatched together. This wasn't hatred. This was calculated revenge. The revelation that Eleanor and Charlotte had been here together just weeks before Eleanor's death hit me with the force of a physical blow. Charlotte, the daughter who publicly hated me, was secretly in league with her mother. But why? Eleanor was sick, dying. What were they plotting at this isolated, forgotten inn? The intense feeling of betrayal was now directed not just at Ethan and the secret we shared, but at the entire, monstrously elaborate facade the family had built. I pushed the guest book back. "What do you remember about their stay?" I pressed Doris, dropping the polite facade. "It's important. It's about a family matter." Doris leaned closer, her eyes glittering with what looked like a perverse enjoyment of the drama. "The mother was very ill," she whispered. "But the daughter, she was the one doing all the talking. She was setting things up. They met with a lawyer here, a local man. She said they were finalizing the will." A lawyer, the will. My blood ran cold. Ethan had told me Eleanor's will was straightforward, that everything was left to him to manage for the children. But if they met a lawyer here, outside of New York, outside of his known circle, they must have been making a highly secretive change, a change designed to protect her children from me, or perhaps to punish Ethan for his own infidelity. The pieces were beginning to click into a terrifying picture of planned retribution. The anonymous photo wasn't a warning. It was a clue meant for me to follow, bait on a hook to lead me to the truth. I realized I wasn't the hunter. I was the one being hunted. The whole family was watching, waiting for my next move. I thanked Doris, slipping her a significant cash tip that made her cooperative silence a near certainty. Back in my rental car, I frantically searched for a local law office in Seaview. There was only one, a small firm named Jenkins and Associates. My stomach was a knot of pure dread and curiosity. If I walked in there, I risked exposure, but I couldn't stop now. I needed to see that document, or at least understand its implications. I walked into the humble office, presenting myself as a distant relative, concerned about Eleanor's final wishes. The elderly lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, was hesitant, but surprisingly forthcoming after I showed him a fabricated document proving my relation, a quick edit I'd made on my phone. He confirmed that Eleanor Sterling and her daughter Charlotte had met with him. Mrs. Sterling, he said, adjusting his glasses, was a woman of great foresight. She was very specific about the revisions. He explained that Eleanor had created a separate codicil to her main will, a highly unusual and secretive legal addition. This codicil wasn't about dividing money. It was about the family trusts that controlled the bulk of the Sterling estate and properties, including the New York penthouse and the Greenwich estate. The terms stated that if Ethan were to remarry within 2 years of Eleanor's death, he would forfeit his voting shares in the trust to Charlotte. 2 years. Ethan wanted to marry me after 1 year. The condition wasn't a mistake. It was a carefully constructed legal trap, set to trigger an explosive financial loss. The intense emotional pull I felt for Ethan was now tangled in a web of planned revenge and financial ruin. I drove back to Greenwich in a daze, the lawyer's words ringing in my ears. The codicil was a masterstroke of emotional and financial vengeance. It wasn't about Charlotte hating me. It was about securing her family's wealth by exploiting Ethan's infidelity. Eleanor had known everything, not just about the affair, but about Ethan's impatience, his desire to quickly legitimize our relationship. She had banked on his need for public validation and his eventual proposal. The 2-year window was deliberate, a psychological time bomb. Ethan had proposed after exactly 1 year. If we married now, he would lose financial control of the entire Sterling dynasty. He would be left with his personal income, which was significant, but the family legacy, the power, and the historical homes would pass entirely to his daughter, Charlotte, making her the primary financial controller of his life. This was Eleanor's final deadly act of love for her children and betrayal against her husband. The realization brought a strange, detached calm. My fear had been replaced by a focused, desperate resolve. I couldn't tell Ethan. If he knew, he would have 2 choices: call off the wedding and keep his money, proving Charlotte right, that my influence wasn't worth the cost, or marry me and face financial ruin, a sacrifice that would burden us forever. Either way, the codicil had ensured his ultimate unhappiness. But I still loved him. And now, my curiosity turned to how I could dismantle this legal structure without exposing my own knowledge and the secret I'd uncovered. My tension skyrocketed. The wedding was set for next month. When I returned to the New York penthouse, the opulence felt mocking. Ethan was on a video call in his study, completely unaware that his late wife and estranged daughter had orchestrated his financial dismantling. I watched him through the glass door, the tired lines around his eyes visible even from a distance. The thought of him losing everything because of his desire to marry me was a crushing weight. I had to maintain the facade of the eager, clueless fiancé. This required a level of emotional discipline I wasn't sure I possessed. I prepared dinner, smiling, asking about his day, all the while knowing the true deadline looming over his head. The suspense was excruciating. I desperately wanted to find a loophole in the codicil, some legal technicality that Mr. Jenkins hadn't mentioned. I spent the evening buried in law journals, searching for precedents, anything that could void a contingent will provision based on the knowledge and behavior of the beneficiary. Ethan, sensing my quiet mood, came into the kitchen and hugged me from behind. "You're quiet tonight, sweetheart," he murmured into my hair. "Don't let Charlotte get to you. She'll come around." His confidence in our future, built on the shifting sand of his lie about the will, was heartbreaking. I forced a smile. "Just wedding jitters," I lied. The words tasted like ash. I realized then that my revenge wouldn't be against Eleanor or Charlotte. My own sense of justice now demanded I turn my energy toward protecting Ethan from the consequences of his own betrayal. A truly ironic twist. The love I felt had put me into an impossible position. The next morning, I began searching the Greenwich estate. I knew from my time as Eleanor's assistant that she was meticulous about documentation. She kept a separate set of private papers, documents she only referenced when Ethan was traveling. I suspected the original signed copy of the codicil, or at least a highly detailed draft, might be hidden somewhere in the house, a final piece of leverage or protection for Charlotte. I started with the master bedroom, the suite Eleanor had occupied until her death. I remembered one day while cleaning, seeing her fidget with a painting hanging above her mahogany writing desk. It was a dark landscape oil that Ethan had always disliked. I waited until Ethan left for an early meeting in the city, then I went to work. The frame was slightly loose on the wall. Carefully, I lifted the heavy piece, my heart hammering a frantic beat against my ribs. Carved into the wood paneling was a small keypad safe. My hands were shaking, a mixture of adrenaline and fear washing over me. Now came the hard part, the code. Eleanor had a terrible memory for numbers, always relying on dates that held extreme emotional significance for her. The date of her marriage? Ethan's birthday? No, too obvious. I closed my eyes, trying to channel her deep-seated love for her children and her final, burning anger towards Ethan. Her children's birth dates? I tried them, one by one. The first failed. The second failed. I input the third, Charlotte's birthday, 08-12-1995. The tiny green light flashed. The lock clicked open. A rush of cold air escaped the safe, and my curiosity was about to be satisfied. Inside the small safe were 3 items. A large sealed manila envelope labeled, "To be opened by Charlotte only," a thick, velvet-bound journal, and the original, legally signed document, the codicil. I quickly read the codicil, verifying Mr. Jenkins' account. The terms were precise, ruthless, and legally binding. If Ethan Sterling were to enter into a legally recognized marriage before the 2-year anniversary of Eleanor's passing, all voting shares of the primary Sterling Trust would be immediately and permanently transferred to Charlotte. The phrasing was airtight, a testament to Eleanor's final, devastating betrayal. But it was the journal that drew my attention, its cover worn smooth from years of handling. I opened it to the last entry, dated just a day before she went to the inn. It was a raw, heartbreaking confessional, addressed to no one but herself. She wrote about her love for Ethan, a love that had soured into crippling jealousy and finally vengeful resolve. She wrote about discovering the affair after finding a specific intimate text message on Ethan's phone. A message from me. "I thought I was dying of illness," she wrote, "but the real pain was dying of his betrayal." The most shocking part, however, was in the sealed envelope. I hesitated, knowing this was Charlotte's private correspondence. Yet I needed to know the full extent of their plan. I steamed it open. Inside was a handwritten letter from Eleanor to her daughter, outlining the codicil and stating, "He chose her over us. Make sure he pays for it. But Charlotte, darling, don't let her get away with it either. Find proof of her involvement before I was sick. I suspect she was seeing him long before I hired her. Find the receipts." The tension was now unbearable. The fight was not just financial. It was a deep-seated personal revenge plan aimed at destroying me entirely. Eleanor's instruction to Charlotte, "Find the receipts," echoed loudly in my mind. She wanted proof that the affair began before her health crisis was openly known, which would paint me as a calculating opportunist who used her illness as cover. The truth, of course, was that the affair did start before she was formally diagnosed, during a period of marital distance. But if Charlotte found physical proof, it would move the narrative from a messy affair to a premeditated betrayal, and potentially give her grounds to legally contest my future place in Ethan's life. My immediate focus shifted to the past. I tried to recall specific early dates with Ethan. Our first secret weekend away had been in Montauk, almost 2 years ago, long before Eleanor was confined to the house. We had stayed at a small, luxurious resort under assumed names, paid for in cash, or so I thought. Ethan was always so meticulous about covering his tracks. But what about my tracks? I hurried to my old apartment in Brooklyn, the one I had kept quiet about even after moving in with Ethan. An unconscious safety net. I tore through old bills, bank statements, and credit card receipts. And then I found it. A forgotten, itemized statement from my personal card for that weekend. It showed a small, completely innocuous charge, a room service order for a bottle of expensive champagne and 2 crystal glasses, dated precisely to our Montauk trip. The name on the receipt was the Montauk Resort. It wasn't direct proof of the affair, but combined with the context of Eleanor's discovery, it could be used by a skilled lawyer like Charlotte's to create an irrefutable timeline of my deception. The small piece of paper felt like a live wire, the evidence Charlotte was hunting for, and the key to the family's ultimate revenge. The champagne receipt, small and unassuming, represented my past betrayal and the final nail in the coffin of my future with Ethan. If Charlotte found it, she would not only trigger the codicil, ruining Ethan financially, but she would also publicly obliterate my reputation, branding me as a predatory manipulator. The tension was so thick I could almost taste it. I had to destroy it immediately. I returned to the Greenwich estate, the receipt tucked securely in my jacket pocket. I went to the fireplace in the library, a massive stone hearth where Ethan sometimes burned old documents. I lit a small fire, watching the flames flicker to life. The moment was surreal, the silence of the large house broken only by the crackle of wood. This was not just burning paper. This was burning evidence, burning a piece of my old, morally bankrupt life. As I held the receipt over the fire, ready to drop it, a faint scent caught my attention. It was a subtle, distinctive perfume, a delicate floral note. I spun around. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon light, was Charlotte. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was a mask of cold satisfaction. "Looking for something, Jenna?" she asked, her voice low and dangerously calm. My heart plummeted. She had been here, likely waiting, knowing I would look for evidence. My curiosity about her next move was replaced by sheer terror. She knew I knew. She hadn't just set a trap. She had been watching me walk into it. This was the moment of reckoning, fueled by a terrible hatred. I froze, the receipt still trembling in my hand above the fire. Charlotte stepped fully into the room. Her elegant designer clothes, a stark contrast to the sheer vengeance burning in her eyes. "Don't bother," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The game is over, Jenna. I already have copies of everything. The letter, the codicil, the Montauk receipt. Your little Brooklyn trip was quite easy to track." She had anticipated my every move, proving she possessed a ruthless intelligence I had underestimated. "You knew about the affair the whole time," I whispered, the realization hitting me with sickening clarity. "Of course I did," she replied, her lip curling in disgust. "My mother and I had a whole month together before she passed, a month to plan, to execute. She didn't want him ruined, not entirely. She just wanted him to know the price of his betrayal. But you were the variable she couldn't account for. You were the one she truly wanted to punish." Charlotte paused, letting her words sink in. "The photo I sent to your house? It was to confirm my suspicion that you'd be too curious to leave well enough alone, that you'd track the inn, find the codicil, and confirm for yourself that I hold all the power." Though, so you want me to call off the wedding," I stated, the fire burning the edge of the receipt now. "To protect your father's money." Charlotte's smile was chilling. "No, Jenna. I want you to go through with it. I want him to lose everything. But more than that, I want you to be the reason he loses it. I want to see his love for you turn to ash when he realizes what you've cost him. And I want to watch you struggle to keep his attention once he's merely a wealthy businessman and not the powerful man you betrayed my mother for." Bracket. Charlotte's final demand was the cruelest twist of all. She didn't want a quiet retreat. She wanted a spectacular public collapse, a definitive act of revenge where I would be the central villain. She wanted me to marry Ethan, knowing it would financially devastate him, and then deal with the fallout of his inevitable anger and disappointment. The depth of her hatred was profound. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I had an impossible choice. Tell Ethan the truth, confess everything, the affair, the codicil, the trap his daughter set. He would call off the wedding, secure his fortune, but he would also know I had been complicit in the secret, and the damage to our love would be irreparable. He would see me as a source of devastating financial tension. Marry Ethan and remain silent. Allow him to lose the bulk of his power and inheritance, leading to a life of financial struggle and bitter betrayal when the truth inevitably came out. Our marriage would be built on a financial disaster I knew about, but kept secret. Disappear, break off the engagement without explanation, saving his wealth, but confirming to him and the world that I was nothing more than a shallow gold digger who ran when things got complicated. This option would save him financially, but destroy his heart and my reputation completely. I looked at Charlotte, realizing she had engineered a no-win scenario for me. "You've miscalculated one thing," I said, my voice finally steady. "I genuinely love your father. My curiosity led me here, but my love won't let me watch him fall. I'll find a way out of this trap, one that doesn't ruin him or confirm your mother's vengeful plan." Charlotte merely smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "You have 3 weeks, Jenna. Tick-tock?" I spent the next week in a haze of sleepless nights and frantic legal research. Charlotte was right. The codicil was airtight. I needed a legal strategy, but I couldn't risk exposing the truth to Ethan's regular lawyers, who were fiercely loyal to the Sterling name. I needed an outside expert, someone who specialized in contesting wills on the grounds of duress or undue influence. Driven by desperation, I reached out to a former colleague from my personal assistant days, a woman named Sarah, who had moved on to work for a high-powered boutique law firm known for handling complex estate disputes. Sarah was initially hesitant, But when I framed the situation as a vulnerable client being taken advantage of by vengeful family members, her professional curiosity was piqued. I sent her a redacted copy of the codicil, omitting all names and specific dates. A few days later, Sarah called me, her voice buzzing with excitement. "This is brilliant," she said. "The codicil is flawless on the surface, but the fact that Eleanor drafted it in a remote town using an obscure lawyer and kept it completely hidden from her husband suggests a clear intent to mislead and manipulate. It's a very strong case for fraud upon the spouse. A direct betrayal of their marriage vows in a legal sense." She continued, "However, to win, we need to prove that Eleanor created this document in secret, specifically to punish Ethan for the affair. We need documentation that links the codicil's creation to the discovery of the infidelity." This brought me back to the safe and the critical contents I had taken and then put back. I knew I had to get back into the safe to collect the ultimate evidence. The night before a scheduled dinner with Ethan's business associates, I knew I had my chance. Ethan would be preoccupied, and Charlotte, confident in her victory, was likely keeping her distance. I had to retrieve the final pieces of evidence from the safe, Eleanor's journal and the letter to Charlotte. These documents, linking the discovery of the infidelity to the codicil's creation, would prove Eleanor's final act was one of revenge, and not merely prudent estate planning. I went back to the master bedroom, the heavy oil painting now familiar under my touch. The safe clicked open easily with Charlotte's birthday. I pulled out the journal and the letter, tucking them deep into a hidden pocket of my dress. Just as I turned to leave, the door to the bedroom opened. It was Ethan. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Jenna, what are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. My heart seized. The intense tension between us, suddenly stripped of all pretense, was suffocating. I couldn't lie, not anymore. His betrayal of Eleanor had led to her final, devastating betrayal of him, and I was caught in the middle. I walked towards him, the crinkle of the documents the only sound in the huge, silent room. "Ethan," I began, my voice raw with the truth I had carried for weeks. "I found something. Something that changes everything about the wedding and your mother's death." The look of confused fear on his face was agonizing. This was the moment I had dreaded. The full, painful truth of my actions and his wife's final act of vengeance was about to be laid bare. Ethan's face drained of color as I showed him the codicil and read excerpts from Eleanor's vengeful journal. The realization of his late wife's meticulous betrayal and the full extent of his daughter Charlotte's calculated hatred for me was devastating. He didn't erupt in anger. He simply looked old, defeated, his political charisma utterly extinguished. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew the whole time." His love for me, which had driven him to propose, had nearly cost him his entire legacy. The wedding was immediately postponed. Within days, Sarah, my lawyer friend, had the lawsuit filed. Sterling versus Sterling, contesting the codicil on the grounds of fraud and undue influence, using the journal and letter as definitive proof that the document was created under the emotional duress of a dying woman seeking revenge for her husband's infidelity. Charlotte was blindsided, having anticipated a surrender, not a fight. The legal battle was ugly, public, and exactly the scandal Charlotte had hoped to inflict on us. But it backfired. Ethan stood by me, his financial tension now focused into a fierce resolve for justice. The court, swayed by the explicit, vengeful nature of the documents, ruled in Ethan's favor. The codicil was voided. Ethan retained control of the trust. Charlotte, having played her hand too aggressively, lost everything. She and Ethan are now completely estranged. My relationship with Ethan, having survived a secret affair, a terminal illness, a legal trap, and a very public spectacle, is now, ironically, stronger and more honest. We live quietly now, far from the New York spotlight, knowing the price of our secret. We haven't set a new wedding date. The love is real, but the wound of the betrayal, mine to Eleanor, Eleanor's to Ethan, and Charlotte's to me, serves as a constant, heavy reminder of the cost of curiosity and the chilling, long-term nature of vengeance. Click on the next story waiting for you on screen. Because trust me, the betrayals only get darker from here.